And so Warren Buffett's worth maybe like 85 billion, somewhere around there. And when Warren Buffett was 65, he had only made like 5 billion.
Wow. How old is he now?
He's like in his 80s.
Wow.
And so much of Buffett's success is just because he's been doing it for so long. And there's like a classic, again, I'm not an investor, I'm not pretending to be, but it's like time in the market beats your timing in the market. And they were basically analyzing, it's like there's way more successful investors than Buffett, like way more successful if you look at their annual returns and stuff. But Buffett started when he was like 11.
Wow.
And so he's just had all this time to get the experience, to get the lessons, and then to benefit from the compound interest. And I feel like that's the opportunity you have being so young and being an entrepreneur, combined with the amount of hours, is it just gives you like all this experience, and you're investing your early 20s into getting ahead almost.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like, it's addictive. Like once you have one win, I think that's like the key is like that first sale, that first win, that first bit of like reinforcement. Like if you just fight to get that, now you're hooked. Like whether you change your offer or you completely pivot your business model, like that one win is the hardest to get and it's the most powerful one.
Yeah.
And that's where it all starts. And then you can decide if you like the game, but you got to get that first win first.
It's like playing Mario. You got to complete the first level.
Yeah.
You know? And then if you enjoy it, then why not do the next level? It's so interesting. I love what you said about you just feel like you have this desire to prove yourself to yourself. There's this quote from Maslow. He's the guy that made the hierarchy of needs. And it goes something like, whatever you can be, you must be. God didn't give birds wings for them to walk along on the ground. And I think that there's something about knowing deep inside yourself that you're capable of more. That I think a lot of us want to try to unlock and want to express in the world.
It's like the happiest I think most people will ever be is like when they're in like the hunt, like when they're in the game. And I think I remember like telling somebody that like 6 months ago when I literally had nothing to show for it. No results, no business, no clients, nothing, not even an offer. And I was like, I just have a feeling like one day I'm going to look back at these times and those are going to be the times. Like it still gives me chills. I'm like, those are going to be the times I look back on and like, those were the best of times. And like, you hear people say that a lot, like once they've achieved something. And so I think that's probably, it was just me like repeating that. But I genuinely recognized that like in that grind with no results, those were still the best of times. Like that was like the time I was going to look back and like miss.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at it like that and you look at like the work as like a privilege, it just completely flips the script in your mind. And then you can just go all in and be willing to make those sacrifices, which are going to look different for everyone.
Yeah. But it's like you literally described earlier. We look back on our early stages like a parent looks at their child, like with that element of pride and that element of joy and that element of, wow, like great job, kiddo. And it's so interesting. There's a lot of talk about exponential growth and 10x. And one of my favorite entrepreneurs on the planet is a guy called Dan Sullivan. And he has this thing where, you know, we all have 10x'd in our life multiple times. And, you know, I've got two daughters, one's 4 and one's 1. If I look at my 1-year-old, it's like she can't talk yet. And in the span of 2 years, she's going to 10x her language capability. You know, just a few months ago, she couldn't walk. She's 10x'd her movement capability. She's 10x the speed she can get from here to that door. You know, or my oldest, it's like she just learned how to ride her bicycle. She's 10x'd her movement speed again. We do this constantly throughout our lives. And every single person who's listening to this, they can look back and say, oh yeah, I remember when my income was $5 an hour when I was doing chores for my granny.
Yeah.
And you can see how you've exponentially grown.
Yeah.
And you can do it again.
And even if your income, like let's say, like you're in my scenario where you just quit your job and your income is like less than what it was 2 months ago or something, you can look at your mindset and be like, what are the horizons and the standards that I measure myself on now? Because if you're growing and you're getting around successful people, which is number one key to like success is like get around successful people, which is why Skool is so awesome. But if you're doing that, like your standards are just going to increase. Like the numbers you measure success by are going to increase. And I think there's this time I was setting up a podcast with this guy who's he's like an info product businessman. I don't know exactly what his business was, but I remember I was compiling these courses for my original Skool community where I just wanted a bunch of entrepreneurs to teach how they'd made their first $1,000. And so we were communicating via email, and there was a little bit of a language barrier. He was based in China. And so I explained to him I wanted this to be like a course on how to teach kids or how kids could make their first $1,000 online. And we get on the call, and he had created this whole presentation, and it was how to make your first $100,000 online. Wow. And he just like misunderstood the number. And I was like, oh, I'm thinking too small. And it was geared towards total beginners. Yeah. It's like how to make your first $100,000 with an info product. And it was just like a reminder that like those things like change. Like that's such a good measurement of growth to like look at like what kind of numbers did you think in last year? What goals did you set? And now how are you thinking differently? And how are you thinking bigger? And that's like the best metric. Because if you're thinking bigger, you're setting bigger standards, you have, a higher requirement for yourself of like what a good day looks like and what a good amount of output is. That's what's going to create the results.
Yeah. Because you think back to the first, one of the first big ticket products you sold, $3,000 for 1 month. You now make $30,000 a month. And you thought that $3,000 was massive. And now you're like, oh, bro, that's like 10% of my like monthly recurring revenue. Mm-hmm. You're literally living it in real time.
Yeah, it doesn't feel real at all. Like meeting the other Skool Games winners and like as much as like the identity thing is so key, it's crazy because like so many people have asked me like, what's it like now to like make $30,000? And I'm like, I don't know. Like I really just still feel like so like inadequate sometimes when I'm like meeting these other people and I'm like getting to sit in this podcast with you. Like I was watching these podcasts religiously like just a few months ago. And it was like so intimidating to even think about meeting any of the guests on this podcast. Yeah. And so it's like, yeah, I think also that like comes back to this like concept of like, it will never be enough, and not in a bad way, but just that like, I will always be hard on myself because I know I could be doing more and I know I could be growing. And unless I am putting those like, I'm like juicing every bit of like energy I have out of a day and like putting as much work in as I can, like I won't be happy. But like, that's kind of a good, at least maybe it's psychopathic, but I think that's a good metric to base your happiness on, because like nobody else can determine that for you. You're in control of how much work you put in, where you put that, and that is what is going to directly correlate to the impact you make on the world. And so if that's how you measure like your like worth as a person, or your like just how proud you are of yourself, then you're always going to be pushing yourself to do better and do more and improve and learn and get around better people. And there's still days where like I'll put in 12 hours of work or something. I'm like, dang, that should have been a 16-hour day. Like I spent like 4 hours, not working. Like I got to sleep less tomorrow. And so, but yeah, I think that like I measure a good day based on like, how does that compare to the day before? And like, am I making progress forward? And it's not even necessarily about like the income. It's more like, it's like, am I innovating? Am I creating new solutions? Am I like working harder? Because like I could lose everything tomorrow, but if I'm connecting with successful people, I'm finding new solutions, finding new problems to solve, finding new clients. Like I'm more interested in that kind of progress than I am in like the actual number in my bank account.